All right, everybody, welcome back with the Plat. This is a Team Pocket special episode coming to you from our bunker in New Zealand. How you doing today, Laliet?
I'm doing pretty good. I was fortunate that I was sent on a mission by our boss, and I'm actually currently back in the States, working on some stuff. I know you're still over there in New Zealand holding down, the fort for us and making really big plans. We have the biggest plans, and we're the greatest, most best Team Pocket you've ever seen.
That's right. It's huge. And today we're going to be ranking every 3 diamond card in the game. Now, we are going to try to go through this relatively briskly because there's a lot of cards here. But I want to say before we start, me and Laliet have already made this tier list. We've discussed it. We spent quite a bit of time doing it. So it's not like if I put Magneton, for example, in tier C, which is, better options, basically. That's not me not thinking about it. It's just because we've already discussed it. But we'll try to say something about the cards we put in there, but also so this isn't 2 hours long with this many cards. We're going to try to just keep it moving as well. So really quick, Magneton, what do you think he deserves tier C for?
Well, I'm actually a bigger fan of Magneton than you, but he has played in a deck, so he does need to be, at least in an area where, he is playable, but there are better options than him for sure. So in the non-EX version of Pikachu, he is ran because you can use him along with Raichu and Lieutenant Surge, and then you can go ahead and come up and knock out, some EXs in one hit, and definitely, the non-EXs in one hit.
I think we basically split the difference here. I think I put it down lower, and he put it a little bit higher. And it's basically that Magneton, if you're running 2 Raichus and no Pikachu EXs, he has a home. Outside of that, he doesn't seem like he does that much for me right now. But I mean, I just don't think he's really needed right now. But that doesn't mean that he's terrible. And in fact, every time a new Lightning card comes out, this is a chance that this card becomes one of the best in the game. Because it's like it's a stage 1 that generates energy every turn. That's pretty good. All right, Greninja. I think Greninja doesn't really need that much explanation. I think it's clearly a tier S. Yes, it's a stage 2. Yes, it only does 60 damage, but it's like an anti-potion, right? It gets to just kill your opponent's backline. It gets to just make those break points easier. And honestly, him as an attacker is not irrelevant. It does come up sometimes, and 60 damage is fine because it's really 80 damage if you need it to be.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about Greninja is he is a double Giovanni every turn, and he also has the ability to attack 2 energy for 60, which is, roughly on curve. So he's fantastic. We do recommend with all of your bench sitting stage 2s to run a 1-2-2 line. Just makes kind of the Pokeball math and everything better for not starting a naked Froakie. You got to get that Froakie clothing.
That's true. You got to get some that energy on Froakie. Next up, we got Flareon, nearly unplayable. Unfortunately, nearly all the evolutions are bad. I was a big fan of them when I started, but I think Flareon is like almost unplayable. It's nearly, when I say nearly unplayable, I mean, there's like a little bit of a chance you might want to play this, but I mean, for 1 more energy, you got a Charizard. Yeah, it does 10 more damage than an Arcanine, I guess. But I honestly just don't see a reason why I would want to run this card almost ever.
Yeah, and I think the best way to think of our tier list in general is it's an access to the card tier list, right? So nearly unplayable is playable against the CPU in the early game. I believe Plat actually cleared like a lot of the CPU stuff with an Evolutions deck that he made. So it's just, there's going to be cards above it that replace it as you get access to those cards.
Yeah, and also, yeah, if you're fighting PvE and stuff, Flareon 110 damage is totally fine, especially on all the early PvE stuff. It's not until like the pro one where they start using EXs where suddenly you're like, uh-oh. That's why I thought Vaporeon was so good, because it was clean in house, man. All right. Better options, Nidoking. I think Nidoking is a cool card, and it's kind of a fun card that does decent damage, but they're not really the best in house. They're not the best at anything they do. Yeah, they do effectively 100 damage because of the poison. It's got 150 HP, but there are things with just like it's a stage 2, which is clunky, and there are things that just do better damage for the exact same amount of energy, where I would almost never really, I don't really care about the poison that much, because if I care about the poison, it means I'm probably using Weezing and I'm using Muk, because that's the only thing Koga targets. So the poison on this doesn't really feel like it doesn't feel synergistic with the kit for me.
Yeah, and we're ranking this card like as a standalone. Like you can run a 2/2/2 set of Nidoking, and it's going to be better in whatever deck you make than with the Nidoqueen.
Yeah, no, Nidoking, this is Nidoking by itself. This is not including Nidoqueen at all. We're going up to the A tier for Kangaskhan. That is highly playable. I don't think I think you could argue Kangaskhan is meta defining, but I think it's lacking that power level, and it's more just because like it's one of the best basics and it's in any color, so it's meta defining in that way. But I don't feel like people are building to play around Kangaskhan. You just know you're expecting it, which is why I think this card is highly playable. Great damage, great wall. It's probably never going to retreat with it, but it does damage for a low energy investment, which means they can't just ignore it for like 10 turns, right? Eventually they're going to have to kill it, and by that point you've also built up your own wall.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's fantastic. It's probably the best big basic in the game that goes in the most number of decks because it's colorless. And you know, Pikachu does run Giovanni just to be able to one-shot this because it is that big of a deal for Pikachu to deal with.
Yeah, because if this guy could 1v1 Pikachu, if you like 1 out of 9 times he gets to just kill the Pikachu if they don't have Giovanni, because he'd hit 62 times in a row, which isn't likely, but it's something that this card could do for a very little investment. So I will take that win rate. All right, Blastoise, where are you at here? This is going up to the playable tier. I wouldn't call quite this highly playable. Oh, wait. All right, so Blastoise is going up into the highly playable tier. What do you think about Blastoise?
I love Blastoise. I know you played around with a deck, so I'll kind of hand it over to you to talk about why this is better than Blastoise EX in some situations.
Oh, I mean, I think it's actually better in most situations, because the difference between Blastoise and Blastoise EX is 20 damage. And 20 damage is like a lot, but it's not. 140 versus 160 is not a big enough of a break point for me to really matter that much. Now, it does matter because it's also on the low end, right? It's 80 versus 100. Does that break point matter? Still not that much. Like, you're two-shotting 160 still. Like, I just don't think that 20 damage in this spot is that important. And of course you would rather have the higher number, but not losing 2 points when this dies is actually a huge deal. But honestly, the reason why it becomes highly playable is because Misty's very, very good. This thing gets to ramp out, and if it's hitting for 140 on, you know, turn 3 or 4, like, there's just no opponent's going to be able. It's one-shotting most things at that stage of the game, and a 2-shot's literally everything in the game, no problem. So overall, it's just, I think it's a super good card.
Nothing's cooler than using Giovanni to kill like a Mewtwo EX with your Blastoise.
Yeah, and because that extra 10 damage does bring in the Mewtwo EX. It brings in the Machamp. Can't forget about that. You don't want to forget about that Machamp. All right, so Melmetal here is going to be in the C tier. I feel like people shit on this card, and I think this card is clearly decent. I think it would actually be playable. I could move this a tier up if there was just more metal stuff in the game. It's like, I mean, Dragon's the most unsupported archetype, but this is like the second most unsupported archetype. So I think once there's like a trainer for it, once there's some other metal cards you might actually want to run, maybe some synergy, I think this card becomes pretty good. I mean, 120 damage for 4 energy is not ideal, but it's decent. But taking 20 less damage from every instance of damage is like, from attacks, is like huge. This is a great wall, and he hits really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And if it wasn't for coughing kind of like squeezing out a lot of the value of being a wall that can get picked up by Koga, you might see this card played more.
True, yeah, because this is a stage 1 also. It's not even a stage 2. So that's like some pretty beefy stats for a stage 1. But yeah, coughing kind of beats him out right now because he has, I mean, he has Koga, right? He has that support, and he could deal damage without putting any energy on him, whether or not you want to even be doing that. All right, so next up we have got the Poliwrath. Poliwrath I'm also putting here. I just think that you're not realistically going to be running this stage 2 when you're probably going to be running Blastoise. I like it, exactly what I say, better options, right? I just don't think this is the best thing you can be doing at this with this stage 2, but I don't think that makes it a bad card. Like if you don't have Blastoise or you just don't like Blastoise, I think Poliwrath is super viable. Whenever it gets attacked, it deals 20 damage back. So it's kind of effectively doing 100 damage a turn. It 2 rounds pretty much everything in the game. It's got pretty decent HP. I think it's a super reasonable card to use.
He's really good at two-shotting things, and both the stage 1 and the stage 2 are completely colorless attackers, and this one only needs 1 water, so he's an easily splashable card, and in a world where you want to be kind of crazy, you could just run him, turn off the energy, and hope for some misty magic.
Yeah, it's true. And you know what? Because worst case scenario, if they ever want to hit him, they're going to have to take 20 or probably 40 damage to actually kill him. I think he's like close to being good if it wasn't for the fact that I think there's like just strictly like, I think Blastoise is probably just a better card to run nearly always without a very specific deck plan. If water gets some cool healing synergy though, I think that would be a pretty cool card. Jolteon is actually falling into the exact same tier. You know, you can tell that we planned this out in advance. Jolteon is, I think I'm higher on Jolteon than Laliette is. I highly value the low investment for being able to get such crazy amounts of damage. Obviously the average damage is 80, but I mean, if you look at a lot of Pokemon, like I feel the average is 80 and it can do 0, but a lot of things that are doing 80 are like this is more than a lot of these stage 2s are even doing. So I think that this is a pretty good amount of damage. The biggest downside is 90 HP. If it had 100 HP, it'd be a lot harder to kill. You know, Pikachu one-shots it. It gets 2-shot by the Mewtwo, even with just like the 50 attack points. I mean, so its HP is like a little lower than I would like. But I actually think that it's, as the EV evolutions, it's just way better than the other ones. But, I mean, yeah, I'm probably still not running it in most decks because I'm probably not going to be wanting to run EV for the most part.
Yeah, and really what this ends up being is it's flipping 4 times to do the same thing as an EX Marowak, right? So they're both 2 energy. They're both going to have those same kind of ratios of being able to do, like, you know, crazy big damage, like 160. And they're both stage 1s. Of course, this is a 1 prizer, but Marowak probably survives more first hits than Jolteon does.
Yeah, give me an EX Jolteon with 110 HP, and you flip 6 coins. I'm in. All right, Alakazam. I think Alakazam, I'm not embarrassed to say, is one of the best Pokemon in the entire game, EX included, I think, honestly. Alakazam is... nothing hits as hard as he does for a non-EX. I mean, Blastoise gets pretty close, and Charizard hits her 150 as well. But this guy could hit, I mean, you know, if they have 100 energy, he hits for infinite damage. But realistically, a lot of attackers are going to have 3 or 4 energy on him. And once they have 3 energy, right, he's hitting for 150, but then he's hitting for 180 on a lot of these characters too. So I love the mechanic of punishing heavy energy investments, because that's like, it's double good, because they've invested their energy in it, so you want it to be dead so it stops attacking you, but it also loses all their tempo because they don't have energy on other stuff. So Alakazam is just a fantastic card. Absolutely one of my favorite cards in the game.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by Alakazam. I was a little bit worried about the 3 manual attachments. So, like, the way I prefer to play this card is with Kangaskhan. You throw the Kangaskhan out there, buys you some time. You make the 3 manual attachments. You get going, because you do not want to run Psychic's Energy Ramp, because that's also a stage 2. And as we repeatedly say, you know, on the channel, running, you know, 11 or 12 Pokemon that all go towards 2 lines is really expensive. Then you just only have 6 other slots to play cards, and you're gonna have to make cuts that normally you wouldn't make. You won't be playing Potion, you won't be playing Red Card, etc.
Yeah, it's you typically don't want to run 2 stage 2s. Maybe there's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's like some deck building math for certain situations for certain things to come up, but as a general rule of thumb, like if you're running Alakazam, you're probably not running Gardevoir. But I don't think that matters. I think Alakazam is like a meta call card. Like, I think there's going to be metas. He's like easily the best card in the game where he just one-shots everything. And then there's going to be ones like we're currently in where he's still good. But like, you go up against a Mewtwo and you know they attack and they go down to 2 energy, and now you're not one-shotting their Pokemon anymore, and then they get a ramp back up to 4 and still one-shot you. That's looks really bad on him. So like he's not good against the other psychic deck, but I think as far as like most normal decks that aren't the top of the end super decks in the meta, I think he's like one of the greatest cards in the game. And his time to shine is gonna come. It's still gonna come once they release some EX cards that don't discard their energy that are good. All right, Gyarados. Gyarados, where you at? Gyarados is going into boom to the C tier. I think this is just a sign of the more I look at Gyarados, I just become less impressed with the card overall, and I can't even really explain why. I think I can. I think 4 energy is a lot, even with a Misty. I would rather be using Misty on Blastoise at this point and just killing them, because Hyper Beam is a cool attack that takes 4 energy, but it does 100 damage and it discards an energy. To me, these are almost like opposite abilities in a sense, where it's like I either want to kill them or I want to do lower damage earlier and discard their energy. This is like not quite enough to kill them most of the time, and it's also it could discard their energy, but like at this point of the game I'm kind of over that. I feel like I don't know, I just don't feel like it's quite a good merge of abilities, even though I think the card reads really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, decks tend to do one-shotting or two-shotting. We don't really have like a Bats deck. There in the TCG card game, there was, you know, like a Lando Bats deck where you did bench damage like Hitmonlee, and when you evolve the Bats, they have an effect similar to Greninja, and you kind of just spread damage all over the board and then kind of like pop all of their creatures at once. So really everything in the game right now is either one-shotting or two-shotting, and playing a two-shotting deck that needs 4 energy to attack just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's too slow in that. And then again, if you're playing a 2-shotting deck, I just don't feel like the discarding the energy is enough upside once you're at 4 energy yourself. It's like, because like there's another card like Mawlite or whatever I think it is, where it's like 1 energy, it's like 30 damage with a 50% chance to discard an energy, and I'm like, I much prefer the discarding energy on something that early in the game as opposed to something like this. Although I think this card again reads strong, I just don't think it actually pans out to be what I'd rather be trying to one-shot stuff with Blastoise, I think. Beedrill here. Beedrill is going to be the first D tier, which saddens me. This is probably my favorite card that's going to end up going in this tier. 70 damage for 1 energy sounds like a lot. But then you remember this is a stage 2, and that is a very, very low payoff for a stage 2. So in the absolute perfect scenario where this is evolving as soon as it can, it's still like worse than a Sand Slash in most of the games, right? Like, do you really care that this only takes 1 energy? I don't think so that much. I'd rather have it do more damage.
Yeah, I think Sand Slash is more playable, even though it needs a 2nd energy, just because it's easier to get it online.
Yeah, and again, because Sand Slash is a stage 1, this is a stage 2 with arguably the exact same payoff, but lower investment. But it's not lower investment because you're actually running a stage 2 Pokemon instead of a stage 1, so it's less on-board investment, I suppose, in a way. But yeah, overall, I'm not a huge fan of the card. Next up,
it's an attacker, you have to run the full 2-2-2 line. You can't run a 1-2-2 line of an attacker.
Yeah, it's I'm not a huge I love this card. Beedrill's one of my favorite Pokemon. He helped me kill Brock back in the day, you know. But Electros. This is a, again, I think this is a cool sounding Pokemon, and he looks cool. He's just not quite there. 3 energy to deal 80 damage, so triple the energy of this guy to do 10 more damage. But you flip a coin, if heads, they're paralyzed. That's like, paralyzed is good. Like, that's a great effect, but I'm pretty sure you can evolve out of it, so it's not like busted. Basically, this card is just not very good, especially when you compare it directly to like another card that's going to be on this list here. I don't even know where it's at. But it's like Omnite or something like that. Is it even on this list? I don't know. There it is. Yeah. Omstar, right? It's like the exact same text in a lot of ways. I just don't think this payoff again for this stage 2 is not high enough for me to want to run. You're not even guaranteed to 2-shot everything at 80 damage. Not to mention that you're only 50% of the time even getting the upside of having the paralysis.
Yeah, I honestly think this card could just do paralysis and not be OP.
I think
damage.
I think it could too. Can you retreat out of paralysis?
you cannot retreat out of paralysis. It would be a very good card, but I don't think it would be OP.
Yeah, I think it would be borderline OP if it wasn't for the coin flip, but maybe. I mean, I haven't thought about it enough, I suppose, but right now, I just think the upside is too small. Mewtwo.
And the basic has 30 HP.
Oh, the basic is the 30-30. Oh my god, I hate that Pokemon. That's what made me think Ditto was good. I'm like, oh, I could use Ditto and have that and and I was like, wait a second. Then I saw Farfetch'd. I'm like, what? What's going on? Farfetch'd is just a better card. Mewtwo is a playable card for sure. I don't know how many situations you're going to run Mewtwo over Mewtwo EX, but if you don't have a Mewtwo EX, I mean, Mewtwo is fine, right? It does essentially the same thing, just a little bit worse. And the upside of it being a little bit worse is that you don't, lose the game after 2 of these die. You could still have more, keep going. But it's a basic Pokemon, 4 energy to do 120 damage. Like, compare that to Gyarados, right? Like, it does more damage. And I know this has the downside of discarding energy, but this is a basic, and this is in the psychic where it has the built-in energy ramp anyway. So it's actually like, yes, of course it's a downside, but it's less of a downside in psychic than any other type.
I think you said everything the right way. That's how I feel about him too.
We all, Mewtwo is one of my favorite cards. That's not true. Mewtwo EX is though. Arcanine, this is a E tier, nearly unplayable. I would not say Arcanine is unplayable. I would say it's really close though. This card is, you could do 100 damage with it, and then he doesn't immediately die. It's funny because this and Flareon are like so similar. Their numbers are all slightly different, but you could tell like this, the numbers were, it was like the same card, and they're like, oh shit, we need another card for the set. So they're like, all right, there we go. Now we got 2 cards. So it's like, all right, give this one 10 more HP, make this one do 10 more damage, give them the same weakness, make them both stage 1s. This one has to discard an energy, this one has to deal self-damage. Boom, we got 2 cards. They basically fulfill the same role badly. That's all.
And not only is Charizard the better version of them, but the thing that stops them from being in the better alternatives is that there is a fire centipede. I forget its name, and it's a 2-star, so it's not on this list. But it also has a 4 energy attack that does 130, I believe.
It's something like that.
It does it better than Arcanine once again, and that's not even a 3-star card.
Yeah, I love that card too. But it's like in the Pokemon games, I love the fire and electricity bug types. Those are always my favorite. Omastar. This card is, I'm going to use my cheat sheet. Boom. They are up in the highly playable tier. And in fact, I'm going to bump them up here. This card is just like a house. Like, even with it being a stage 2, kind of sucks. It being out of a fossil kind of sucks, and it still doesn't matter. 70 damage for 3 energy is not insane either. Despite all that, it has some of the strongest text of any card in the game following that number here, right? During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't attack. That is very strong. It's not quite as strong as paralysis would be, right? Unless, can you evolve through that? Can you evolve and then attack? Does it count as a different Pokemon?
I think so.
Okay.
I haven't had it come up, but of course you can retreat out of it, which is why paralysis would be better. But they're not always going to have the energy resources to do a meaningful attack when they bring up a different Pokemon.
Well, exactly. That's like they attack. They're like, haha, you idiot. I'm just going to retreat out of this. I just throw away 2 energy, and now I retreat. It's like, yeah, but next turn I do it again. And now the Pokemon you wanted to bring in there, do you have 10 energy on your bench? Like, what are you talking about? That's not how games work. So it's like they just quickly, even if they get through this and they kill it, it's like it did so much damage to they either scored you free points, or it got rid of tons of their energy from them trying to play around it. So it's like it did its job. This doesn't need to single-handedly win you the game with its attack to put you so far ahead that you're going to win the game, I feel like. But I feel like it will probably just win the game by attacking.
Yeah, a lot of the time, like, there's a lot of decks that just can't be Omastar. And those are the high energy decks, like the Mewtwo EX deck, the Charizard deck. Pikachu can defeat this. Starmie EX, can retreat easily and not have to worry about losing energy. But all the other decks really don't like seeing an Omastar.
Yeah, like Pikachu 1 energy retreats, probably running X speeds as well. They could do a lot of like electrodes too. Like they could do a lot of stuff. But most of the high energy decks that are good, like the ones that Alakazam are bad against, Omastar is good at. Omnicron. All right, Ditto. We put Ditto higher than I thought. We put Ditto in the needs support tier. I think Ditto is a worse card, I think, than Laliette did, but what do you like about Ditto?
I just think that there are scenarios where this card could be useful, such as if you're running the Charizard EX deck with Moltres, and your opponent's also running the same deck, then you have the ability to get access to Moltres' attack for 1 energy, but you're a non-EX.
Yes, that is true. Like if you're running a Moltres deck and they're running a Moltres deck, you could Ditto their Moltres. If you're in a meta where everybody is running Farfetch'd, this is just a Farfetch'd with 10 more HP then, so it doesn't get Mewtwo, Giovanni killed. It on an open ladder, I don't think you're almost ever going to use this. To me, this feels like a sideboard card or a tournament card where you could see deck lists and you can know what they're bringing. But like, unless the meta was like so defined where I knew it was going up there and it was good for Ditto, I probably want to risk it being a dead card. But I mean, there are feasible situations where I would want to run this card.
And it's really fun all of the time, even if it's not good all of the time.
It's always fun. I really hope they release a weaker Ditto that lets you copy your own stuff. Like a 40 or 30 HP Ditto that lets you copy your own stuff. Like high risk, not even high reward, just fun, All right, Aerodactyl. This is our first trash tier. This card is bad. What to say about it? It's a stage 1 for a fossil, which is not very good. It doesn't deal damage. It has 100 HP, but it's also weak to lightning, so it's not super tanky. And you have to put 2 energy on it for a 50% chance of its attack working. When its attack goes off, it shuffles the active Pokemon into the deck. This does not give you a point for winning. This isn't knocking out the Pokemon. So you're not any closer to winning technically. Maybe if they had 4 energy on the guy, oh, Aerodactyl! But like, this is a lot of investment for a 50-50 to do nothing. Now I could perceive of a meta where people are running super light on basics, and in the early game maybe you could just cheese out a super easy victory. But I feel like the second Aerodactyl started to become good, everyone would hate the game, or the whole meta would instantly change, and Aerodactyl is impossible for him to ever actually be good.
Yeah, Aerodactyl is a need support card that needs the most specific and balanced support, because no one wants to play a game where you get like your 2 Pokemon that you originally benched lifted off the board because they play like Super Scoop Up or something like that can target your opponent. So you get 1 free remove a card that doesn't have energy on it or something of that nature, and then you hit heads with Aerodactyl and then you win. Like that's the kind of support it would need to be playable. But then the problem is it becomes so unfun that there's no reason Pokemon would make a card like that.
Yeah, I mean that would introduce like FTKs, is being, they're already in the game in a sense, but like that would be a true FTK where you don't need your opponent to concede potentially. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think he's just straight trash. Charzy Boy here. Charzy Boy I don't think is gonna be too controversial. He's going up to the highly playable tier. Moltres makes him quite good. And just to kind of clarify, like Moltres, Charizard EX is in Moltres. The reason why we put them in different spots on that last tier list was because they're both on the same tier list. This was a tier list evaluating cards, with, and if it's like, oh, Charizard's really good with Moltres, but Moltres is also there, I'm like, well, then that's just Moltres being really good. But we're given, in this, I think it makes more sense to calculate it with Moltres because you're probably running it there with him. But even if you don't have Moltres, this card is still like this card's like a Raichu in a lot of ways, although probably worse. But I still think this card is playable even without Moltres, but it becomes highly playable once you have Moltres.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd play it without Moltres, but the good news is Moltres is in the game. You know what I mean? You can play it with it. And I actually, in my Charizard deck, I run one of these. So I just have the ability to have that one less prizer instead of just, only having the 2 EX Charizard.
100%. Because again, the 200 damage tends to be overkill. So a lot of times just having the 150 damage, the main reason you're running EX is Charizard, I think, is for the HP that he has, as opposed to the damage he's dealing. And so, I mean, maybe that's not always true, but I feel like a lot of times you just run Charizard instead of EX Charizard, and you're just happier with the outcomes on average. So I do like running 1-1, because sometimes it's really annoying if you're going up. The Charizard is bad versus Charizard EX. But Charizard is good against pretty much everything that Charizard EX is good on against, and doesn't die for 2 points, you know?
Yeah, you can lose 2 Charizard non-EXs and then lose your Moltres, and that loses you the game. But having those 2 Charizard non-EXs go down, you still have the opportunity to come up and sweep with Moltres.
Yeah, which is like super good. All right, Moltres. You've heard it. You already all know. Oh wait, this isn't EX. This is I think maybe actually the worst card in the game. This is a basic Pokemon with 100 energy. That doesn't seem too bad. It's already Kangaskhan. This is great. Where does it continue? Sky attack. Flip a coin. If tails, this attack does nothing. That's very bad. You know what I don't want to do? I don't want to spend 3 turns putting energy on a card to then have a 50% chance of it doing nothing. And then when it does do something, there is a lot it does not one-shot. There is a lot that it doesn't one-shot that's relevant. This card's unbelievably bad.
I feel like they missed the mark with, like, this could have had a dig effect attached to it, and it still wouldn't be good, but like it'd be better than it is now, right? So a 3 energy version of dig where it only works half the time, but the other half of the time after you deal this damage, you can't get attacked back.
Yeah, because Doug Trio has the dig ability. This could have been the fly ability from like the games, right? It could have done way less damage and had guaranteed damage on it, and then had a chance to just avoid all damage. Or they could have made it so it just, you don't take any damage and it does this damage, but it only works half the time. Yeah, it's just like, this card is clearly dog water. Super bad. In fact, all the non-EX birds are pretty bad, but the EX birds are really good. So I feel like that's not a mistake. Like most of the EX to this version of Charizard and the EX version of Charizard is just ramping it up from a 9 to a 10, in a lot of the numbers. These are totally different designs of cards in a lot of ways.
And honestly, I like that. I wish that the starters had very different designs as well.
I do too, but this is not what I want. I don't want this. That's not what I want. Please. All right. Machamp, this is a nearly unplayable card. Go. Why does Machamp suck?
Well, we talked in our EX video about how, this going from a 9 to a 10, not that this is a 9, but didn't make the EX version very good either, and it has all the same weaknesses. So it's like the HP isn't high enough to get outside of 2-shot territory, 3 manual energy attachments is rough, and a 2-shot's a majority of Pokemon. Yeah,
I mean, you can't Brock it. It's a stage 2, which sucks. Its HP is like reasonable, but the damage at 100 for 3 energy is just, I don't think it's quite there without some sort of upside. But like, here's what I'm thinking. I'm like, if I have a choice to run Machamp or just Onix, Onix is just doing 70 damage for 3 energy, but I get a Brock it, so it comes on a turn earlier. So by the time I could be attacking with Machamp, I've already done twice as much damage with the freaking Onix, I feel like this card sucks. Unfortunately, I like this card, and I know I like Nidoking, and they look pretty similar in a lot of ways, but at least Nidoking does poison, bro. At least there's an upside there, At least there's something, although I will say that does make it look harder to defend. But I mean, look at that guy. Look how cool he is. Plus, he has that Nidoqueen support. You can't forget that. All right, Gardevoir.
Yeah, the important part.
This is a meta-defining card. I think everyone knows it. You would never have believed it. When this card game came out, everyone that's ever played a card game with resources, everyone's like, what's the strongest thing you could do? From Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh to Marvel Snap to Magic, cheating resources is always the most powerful thing to do. This card cheats resources. Is it literally the most powerful thing you could do? Probably not, because it is a stage 2 Pokemon, but it is borderline one of the strongest things you could do. It cheats resources. It gives you double energy. It allows Mewtwo and Mewtwo EX to attack every single turn because it discards 2 energy and then you get to add 2 energy. It discards, and being able to attack every turn with Mewtwo EX is a lot better than having to take a turn off in between attacks.
She is the thing that makes it viable.
Would you ever attack with Psyshot? Has that ever happened?
It hasn't happened to me.
Someone out there was like, oh my god, she's so cool, she could ramp herself. Can she? I don't even think she can ramp herself. All right, Zapdos. I think I'm gonna put this in the bottom of the nearly playable tier. I think that it's borderline trash because whenever you attack with this, it does 30 damage to one of your bench Pokemon. But I know that this is like, oh, 3 energy for 100 is not that good. 3 energy for 100 is not that good. But this is a basic. This is something that is like pretty darn. That's a lot of damage for a basic Pokemon. I mean, stage 2 is so much more investment of cards in your deck. You can kind of, and also it has a 1 retreat cost. You could run this as your Kangaskhan. I don't know why you'd want to, but you like could because you're running Pikachu EX and you need, lightning Pokemon on your bench. So there's like a viable reason to run this card. But I mean, man, it's still like, I pretty much never want to attack with it. If I'm attacking with this, I'm in a desperate spot and I'm like, I got to record this game. I attacked with Zapdos. You're not going to believe it.
Yeah. I'm never putting any of the cards that we have in nearly unplayable in my deck.
Yeah, I mean, I would run, there's a lot of cards I'd run over the Zapdos. We'll just say that. Next up, we've got Victory Boy. Victory Bell, one word. This is going to be another card that I consider playable, not highly playable. Stage 2 is, when I look at the card, I see a lot of things that I don't like about it. I see 2 energy for 60 damage. I'm like, that's not great, but it's not that incredibly bad. I see it's stage 2. I don't really like that. I see it has 140 HP. That's not like my favorite HP breakpoint, but Fragrance Trap, man. That's such a powerful ability. It allows you to Scorpion someone from Mortal Kombat, like straight up. You get to take anything off their bench, put it right in front of your face. This becomes better if you actually, like, the thing is, I don't usually want to attack something, but once I have, I don't want to put 2 energy on this thing and then attack for 60. Probably I want to pull out their most important target, retreat this, and then come in with something and actually kill something. But still, sometimes if they have like a Kangaskhan, like on the bench that they never put energy on, or if they have like a Snorlax, please, if they have a Snorlax, you just pull this in front of it. And now they're just going to let you sit there and get a free point. Victory Bell can let you just get a few free points at key parts of the game. It's really hard to play around a Victory Bell effectively, I think. But I don't think he quite has the impact that he needs to, him being a stage 2 and just not doing enough damage himself.
Yeah, so Victory Bell is definitely, if there was a card on this list that I could tell you that we're most likely to be wrong about, it would be Victory Bell, right? Because when you have an effect that powerful, there always could be a deck that we just haven't found yet, or nobody that I know has found yet, that fully utilizes this effect because it is a very powerful effect.
It's true.
But I think even that deck would be good at lower level play, but at top level play, I do think it's reasonably easy to play around the card. So like, you get a 2-turn warning. So like, as soon as you see a Bellsprout go down, you know what's going on, and you just don't bench your expensive things. But some decks don't have the choice. Some decks have to bench their expensive things. If you're running Kangaskhan, that might just start in your opening slot. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just my opinions on Victory Bell.
Yeah, I think it's potentially a great card, especially because Erica is like pretty good at keeping it alive. But it gets one-shot by so many things that are like in that top end. I think if they add any kind of trainer or item, it's like your opponent can't retreat next turn or something, suddenly this card goes through the roof. I think this becomes like, this card's going to be a huge problem. Because right now my issue is like, you're going to grab something. Hopefully you can just get a point off of it. But if you can't, you just grab something, deal damage. And then if they can retreat it out, come in and just one-shot Victory Bell, that kind of sucks. But I think that's not as likely as the scenario as it sounds like. I think this card could be way higher. I just don't think the deck for it has been discovered yet.
Yeah,
And it might just need a little more support.
If we had, yeah, stage 2 support, I think could really make the difference, right? A Great Ball could just make this a way more consistent deck.
Yeah, it's a card that everyone should keep their eye on for sure. Next up, we got Starby here, Starbucks. Starbucks is a solid option. I'm always torn on Butterfree because I don't know why I called it Starbucks, but I just do. Butterfree confuses me because like I love the idea of having a potion on all my Pokemon every turn. The issue is, again, it's a stage 2, and then what else am I running that wants this? Like, am I running Butterfree and Venusaur EX? Probably not, because I don't want to run 2 different 2/2/2 lines. So I just don't know where I'm running Butterfree. I like its effect, but on a stage 1, this would be like a great Pokemon. On a stage 2, I don't feel like I have anywhere I want to put it right now, unless they add a massive grass stage 1, you know?
Yeah, it's like a weird hard counter to Greninja that doesn't have a home.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty reasonably powerful effect, but I just don't think it, yeah, like you said, I don't think it has a home right now. And I think it's like, unlike Victreebel, this is actually just like a much more powerful effect. So I don't think I could put it on the same tier as that. What's next? Hypno. Hypno is a good card. I think my issue with Hypno is that I always undervalue how powerful it is to have an ability you could hit every turn, even when it's on your bench. Even if it doesn't work that much, it doesn't matter because it's good still. Like, so it's, you flip a coin, 50% of the time you get to put a Pokemon to sleep. If he's on your bench, you could put an enemy Pokemon to sleep 50% of the time. Another 50% of the time that happens, they get to wake up. So 25% of the time they sleep and they miss their attack. That sounds like it's a pretty low, like, consistency, but this is a stage 1 that's just sitting on your bench. It doesn't even matter. Like, the fact that 1 out of 4 times they're gonna miss their attack, and if they do miss their attack, that's enough to win some games. And if you get it to go off twice, that's probably enough to win most games. So I think overall that does turn into be a quite powerful effect. Even though on paper for me when I read it, I was like 75% of the time it does nothing. But that 25% is very relevant, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you have he's a Pokemon that you're never attacking with, so you can shut energy off and run him as a 1/1 or a 2/2 line. If you get 2 of him down, you get to flip the coin twice. So even if you get tails on the first one, you have an opportunity to still put him to sleep, which just improves your odds. Either way, it's splashable into mini decks, kind of like Kangaskhan, and it doesn't take any resources other than the slots in your deck.
Yeah, I actually think a 1/1 line is actually like super reasonable because this is a cool kind of tech card. But again, when you're doing that, then suddenly, you know, you draw one of them and then you don't draw the other half of, you know, you draw the basic, but you don't draw the stage 1 till turn 8. Like, that gets awkward. But I do think, yeah, it's a good card. It's so little investment for sometimes a game-winning ability. Golem. Golem is a nearly... Nah, he's a need support. This is a card that I think is... Like, here's the thing. I think this card's really bad, but I can't ignore the fact that it does do 150 damage on it. But he does 50 damage to himself. So he effectively has like 110 HP after one attack. So he's not even hard to one-shot necessarily. But you could Brock him and he has 150 damage. I think it's a bad card, but I still think this is like a bad Raichu in a way. Like, you could just go in there, get one attack, sometimes win the game. It's a stage 2, so you don't really want to be doing that as opposed to a stage 1, but I can, like, I don't want to say it's nearly like unplayable because I can imagine wanting to run this because Brock is a card that exists. I think without a Brock, like, this would be 100% unplayable, but being able to ramp out 150 damage, sometimes you just don't have another way to deal 150 damage. You need to kill their Mewtwo EX, and this is your best shot, you know?
Yeah, I am never playing any of the cards that we have in need support currently either, so, but I will say that when you have a card in need support and it already has a supporter that names it in the text, that tells you how bad the card is.
Yes, it's the card needs support. and it has direct support already. So I think Golem is pretty darn bad, but I don't think it's, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we update it to nearly unplayable. Did I talk myself into lowering it a tier? What do you think?
I think 3 damage. I mean, because effectively you can play this as a 3 energy 150, and I just don't think there's any other cards that do that. So
you're right. You're right. That's what we agreed upon. I think it just it's slightly niche enough of a damage number for the investment that it's I think it's worth it. Lapras. I think everyone likes Lapras, right? I think Lapras is like a perfect definition of a playable card. I don't think this card is busted. Like, even with Misty, I'm like, if I have Misty, I'm probably trying to get Misty to go on something else. Like, I'm trying to ramp out my Omastar to get that online as fast as possible. I'm trying to get my Blastoise as fast as possible. Maybe my Gyarados if I'm running that. Lapras is just like kind of a Kangaskhan, but every now and then you have the option. Like, when I was doing my Blastoise deck, it was very common that I would have Squirtle and a Blastoise, but I would not have a War Turtle in my hand. I just couldn't find it. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to hold these Misties for the whole game. So I'm going to just see if I could use the Misty on the Lapras, maybe get lucky, maybe actually get to that 4 energy spot and start hitting for 90 damage, you know? And it's a card that sometimes punches way above its weight class. And even when it doesn't, it's still super solid and just kind of sits there and does its job, you know?
Yeah, for example, Zapdos EX almost never uses its second attack. So this is kind of like a non-EX version of that Zapdos EX, where it does have the ability to do more damage if you ever need it to, but it does do 20 for 1, which with weakness is, you know, an effective amount of damage. That's like a far-fetched.
Yeah, like absolutely a good card. Reasonable, will be played. It's frequently going to be one of the better cards you could play in the water decks, or, you know, it's at least very, very reasonable. Vileplume, I think Vileplume is kind of in a similar category. It is a stage 2, which is worse, but it honestly, it just guarantees to put a Pokemon to sleep for 80 damage. Like, that means 50% of the time, it's effectively going to be doing 160 damage over 2 turns, because you can't retreat out of sleep, right? Is that the one you can't, or is it paralysis? I get some of these status effects mixed up because I hadn't played the actual card game in such a long time.
I don't think you can retreat out of sleep.
Okay, if you can't retreat out of sleep, then that's even like better. Because not being able to retreat is such a powerful mechanic to play with, because that's so much of like mitigating point loss is retreating at the last possible moment. But I mean, 80 damage is reasonable. The fact that it puts him to sleep guaranteed, no flipping of a coin, is great. The fact that it has 140 HP is not the highest HP amount, but I mean, that's still like reasonable. Yeah, I mean, overall, like, I just like this card. I think I'm not like this card's not breaking the game. It's probably frustrating to lose to, but I think it seems like a super like solid card.
There's not many better things you can do in grass right now.
Yeah. You know what I like about Hypno? Hypno's like Weezing. It's because I saw them next to each other. You could put Hypno in a deck without any Psychic. You could just do a full fire deck with Hypno and just try to put their Pokemon to sleep every now and then. I love that. Hypno, you're becoming one of my favorite. I'm gonna have a Hypno Weezing water deck, you know. That's gonna be great. All right. Exeggutor. I don't even remember where we put this. Okay, we put it in the better options deck. This is 130. It's a stage 1. It does 30 damage for 1 energy, and sometimes, so it does on average 45, because if you get a heads, it'll do 30 more damage. I think this card is like pretty reasonable. But I mean, what do you think about this card? What are the better options you think for Exeggutor?
Well, you have the EX version, right, which is just a slightly upgraded. Oddly enough, I actually like this Exeggutor better than that Exeggutor, but I think the real issue comes down to he's not as good as Kangaskhan, right, which is a 1 energy attacker. It's not as good as Lapras because it's a stage 1, and it just doesn't really have a spot in a deck that I've really seen. Like, you could run it with a Venusaur, so like maybe it is playable in a Venusaur deck, but Caterpie is kind of better there, where you can use the Caterpie to get a grass Pokemon from your deck and then start, you know, building up the Venusaur more consistently.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like, I'm thinking about which of these to run. Like, if his job is supposed to be similar to Kangaskhan, the fact that he's a stage 1 is really bad because his like the egg guy is like execute is like what 50 HP or something. So you better be evolving him right away. If you have an execute but not an executor in your hand, you feel like a fool for having run that card instead of Kangaskhan. So yeah, overall, I think that this card would be better than Kangaskhan if it was not for the fact that it was a stage 1. Then it would obviously just be better, but it is a stage 1. So I think that inconsistency for, I think like that's not the biggest thing to pay, but the whole point of like Kangaskhan is you want him to start on the front line, right? And so if that's what this guy's job is, the fact that sometimes he's way worse is going to keep him from being played due to consistency, in my opinion. Wheezy Boy, otherwise known as me this last week, that is he is going up to the highly playable. This card is kind of broken through and kind of in like the Hypno way where I was saying, where people are just playing this now in decks without darkness. Even I don't think I recommend that. I think that's probably not the best use of them, but people are using this kind of as a Kangaskhan, which again, same reason as Executor. I just don't think that's a good idea. But this guy's power lets you poison the opposing Pokemon, so you could put a Coughing and then a Weezing and then poison the Pokemon and just let them sit there. I think that's just a lot more effort for an effect that's probably worse than Kangaskhan because you're just getting 10 more HP. But if you're running a deck with darkness in it, this is probably just like the best card or the second best card. I think Arbok could be the best card. But I mean, it's like, 1 energy. You could actually, you could attack with this, but really his main thing is going to be the Koga combo, right? You're going to Gas Leak, you're going to Koga it, it's going to take some damage probably. You're going to Koga it, that heals it back up to full, right? Because it's a new version of the card. And then you bring in your Muk, you one-shot stuff. Or you don't even need to bring in your Muk. You could bring in your Nidoking. It still does a lot of damage, right?
You can bring in your Dragonite because people are playing it with Dragonite.
Yeah, you can bring in your Dragonite, right? Because like Koga Weezing, what Kangaskhan doesn't have that Weezing does have is Koga. That's like the big difference, is he has direct support. So you could use this as a Kangaskhan wall, but then like you said, after you're done with having it walling up, you don't need to retreat it. You could just pull it back to your hand for free. So it gets around even things like Arbok and stuff, right? Where your thing can't retreat. It's paralyzed. It's slept. It doesn't matter. Koga just puts it back in your hand. So it has it's kind of broken through as being a really good card, basically. Better than what I think it reads.
It definitely has its niche because, Koga is a card that only targets 2 Pokemon, and this is the only one that has an ability that poisons, right? So
yeah, I please God, make a card that Koga wants, make a Muk that Koga wants to target. Why does Koga even target Muk? Because they had to put 2 cards on it, I feel like. But like, I almost never want to target. I just put 3 energy on my Muk to attack. Now I'm gonna retreat it to save 1 point. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's
just thematic, right? It's like,
it's thematic. It's so that we read Koga and we think about looking at what 2 cards does Koga affect. Oh, he does Muk and Weezing. Well, let's take a look at these 2 cards. Like, okay, they're just directing us. So let me talk about Muk right here because we're just gonna skip ahead because he's right there. Venoshock does how much more damage? It does 50 more damage. So he's at 170. What was I at before? I think I was at 190. It does 70, then he gets 50 more damage, right? So it does 120 damage for 3 energy with synergy.
And it would be 20 more because the Pokemon would have to be poisoned, right?
Yes. So it does come out to be roughly, I mean, if they're already poisoned and then you hit them for the 120, then they're kind of taking 130 before they get to attack. That's like, but that synergy outside of Weezing, it's not happening. It's not happening. And maybe that's like, okay, but I feel like that's a lot of work and cards and deck slots dedicated to doing something that things like Charizard just do. Things that Mewtwo just do. They don't need to they don't have this line of text saying, do these 3 plays in a row that do the exact same thing Mewtwo does. Like, I feel like Koga, Muk, Weezing, this is like kind of a trap combo. Like, Koga's not actually, like, he could be used for that, but he's mostly as a Weezing retreat card. But I feel like mostly it's like to make you feel smart. You're like, oh, I used Weezing, I used his gas attack, and I retreated him. Then I brought in my Muck, and then I hit him, but he had 10 HP, but he was poisoned. So it's like, it makes you feel like a smart card gamer, but it's not really like, I don't think the payoff is quite there yet. I think we need like something better. We need a better version of Muck, I think. Like if Venusaur, I think Muck would be so much cooler if Venusaur poisoned. And that means like the second time you did it, it did more damage. Like the first time it does the 70, but it poisons. The second time it does the 120, because it's like he's kind of like digging in. It's like a ramping up attack. I think that there should be more attacks that are kind of like that.
Yeah, I think that would make it worse, but
if it still did the same effect, it just also poisoned. That way you didn't need to have the Weezing effect.
Yeah, that would be a strict buff, right?
Yeah. I don't think it would be that much better. I just think it would feel cooler, you know?
Yeah. I think it's funny because you're absolutely right. He is the most difficult way to do 150 damage to a Pokemon.
Yeah. By far, right? I feel like Nidoking has poison because Muck is in the darkness deck, and they're like, everything needs to inflict poison somehow. Except for Nidoqueen, she is a different thing. But it's like, but there's not enough poison. So poison is only 10 damage. It can be good because it's like a Giovanni, right? That doesn't fall off, and they're guaranteed to take at least one instance of it. And so it's better than Giovanni, I guess, in a lot of ways. But you don't want to pay too high of a premium for that. You want to be careful, like... I'm sorry?
You wait until they print Burbank City.
Is that a good card?
It is a stadium that makes poison do 30 damage in between turns.
There we go.
If they printed that, then, obviously Weezing would be much better. I don't even think you'd play Muck. But
I don't think Muck would get better at all. You'd play a Weezing Nidoking deck. That's why I'm saying Nidoking is not all that bad. All right, Raichu. I think Raichu is like a really, really, really good card. I think this is an A-tier card. Raichu is all about that surprise win out of nowhere. I mean, it's not a complete surprise because they can see your Pikachu, but like being able to just like retreat a Pikachu EX, put in your Pikachu, evolve it into Raichu. It could already be evolved. It doesn't matter. It feels cooler to evolve it right away though. Lieutenant Surge, 3 energy onto it. Then you attach an energy back to your Pikachu EX, so it's ready to go next turn. You Raichu them for 140. It's just like, it's a great way for 0 investment to get 140 damage on a completely new Pokemon. Because you don't need to attach any energy to it directly. Lieutenant Surge takes care of that for you. 140 damage is a lot. He discards all the energy, so you don't want to put too much energy on it. I watched a player I was playing they Lieutenant Surged their Raichu, which put 4 energy on it, and then they attached a 5th energy to it, and then used Thunderbolt. I was like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense.
They obviously thought it discarded the 3 energy and not all the energy.
I was like, I mean, I'm happy they did it, I guess. But yeah, so Raichu, why is Raichu so good?
Yeah, I think you nailed all the good points. In a scenario where the other person doesn't have red card in their deck, or they've already played both red cards, Raichu in the hand with a Pikachu on the board and I know this sounds like a lot, and a Lieutenant Surge in your hand, he plays much more like an item than a Pokemon, right? He plays almost like an item that allows you to knock out, as long as you have Lieutenant Surge. So it's like a combo item or something, trainer. But to knock out anything with 140 HP or less. And the fact that it can be a surprise, like, just because there's a Pikachu on board doesn't mean they know you have a Raichu and Lieutenant Surge in hand. Now, if you have 7 cards, that's a different story, but...
Yeah, I mean, because you could always like evolve the Raichu early also if you're like worried about it. It's nothing wrong. But then once you have Lieutenant Surge kind of reads like discard all energy from your Pokemon, deal 140 damage to opposing active Pokemon. And what's good is because you can Lieutenant Surge, put all the energy on Raichu, and then use your energy for that turn back on your Pikachu EX. That way it's still ready to go the next turn if they wipe out the Raichu. But like Raichu is usually the final attack that's winning you the game. It is a lot of damage out of like what feels like thin air. It's a lot of like damage from hand, basically. Catches people off guard. Now let's take a look. Vaporeon, one of my, I might be notorious. I put this in one of my very first YouTube videos and I said Vaporeon was good. I think Vaporeon is nearly unplayable. The issue with Vaporeon is the better your opponent's cards get, the worse Vaporeon gets, which might surprise you. But when you're going up against a lot of things that do between 40 and 60 damage, Vaporeon is a Chad, bro. That healing for 30 is so much. Once they start hitting for like 80 plus, you're like, what the fuck, bro? Why'd I put 3 energy on this Vaporeon to do 60 damage? That is the worst rate. I'd rather be running Machamp right now. Like, at least I would have gotten 100 damage. Vaporeon farms early AI bots. That's basically it. And really, really low level players. But other than that, it just 3 energy for 60 damage is not enough. The 30 HP is not enough with 130 HP total. And it's in water, so you don't have like Erica backup if you really need it or something. It's just, everything about it is just like not good enough right now. It became, I think, I was like, Flareon was the weakest by far. And like, I think Vaporeon's the weakest of the evolutions now, in my opinion.
I think you're right. And it just shows your like growth in knowledge of the game, right? It's very easy when you pick up a game, especially when you haven't played Pokemon for probably like 20 years, you know, competitively or anything. And you're like, well, this looks good. And then you play against the AI and then it is good. But you know, I think it's something commendable for somebody to say, you know what, I was just wrong about this card, and I've learned since then.
Yes, it was not as good as I thought. I started using it more, and I was like, wait a second. I'm not happy. Every game I have this card, I'm like, damn it. That's probably not a good sign. We got Venusaur here as a needs support. I think that this is a reasonable card, but I probably like, this is kind of opposite for me from Charizard EX. I like Charizard more. Blastoise EX, I like Blastoise more. I like Venusaur EX a lot more than I like Venusaur. I think that the extra 30 HP and the extra 20 damage is actually like super relevant. 80 HP is not enough to one-shot everything you're coming up against. The 160 HP is not enough to live through everything one-shotting you, whereas the 190 lives through essentially everything besides Charizard EX. It's the highest HP in the game, I'm pretty sure, right now. So I just think that this is a card that's just not quite good enough yet. 4 energy for 80 damage is not really where you want to be. The healing for 30 is not really where you want to be when you're probably going to be able to get one shot. Like a Mewtwo EX comes in and just one shots you with a Giovanni. That kind of sucks. So I just think this card is like too much energy investment and you're not getting the durability of the EX version that you need.
Yeah. And, you know, a Golem with a Giovanni will one-shot you. A Charizard EX without anything will... I mean, not EX, sorry. A regular Charizard will one-shot you. And anytime you're a 4-energy attacker, you don't really want to be a 2-shotter. It's the same kind of issue we had with Gyarados, even though Gyarados has a powerful effect in removing the energy. But that doesn't really matter if they bring up a different Pokemon and one-shot you.
Yeah. It's, I just think it's not quite there. I might run it over Beedrill, though. I don't know. I'm not sure. Beedrill does only cost 1 energy and does the same amount of damage, essentially. I don't know. I don't want to think about it anymore. When it's like, again, it's like none of these cards are cards we're playing. Why does it matter? I'm like, yeah, but if I was gonna play one of them, it's like, who cares? We're not playing either of them. All right, next up is Pidgeot. Pidgey ought to be a little bit higher, probably, but I think this is a C tier. I think that this card was, in my mind, going to be one of the best cards in the game. And then I just felt like I didn't need this because the ability is basically Sabrina. But you could use this, you know, every single turn always. You don't need to draw it. But you do kind of need to draw it. You need to get it to evolve to stage 2. But I just found out, like, for me, it felt like 2 Sabrinas in my deck was enough that I didn't really need this ability on top of it. But that doesn't mean that it's, like, useless because it is sometimes using Sabrina every turn for the whole game is powerful. It can be powerful. It attacks for 70 for 2 energy. That's pretty good. And it does have that, like, it could do stuff on your bench even if you never bring it out. So I think it's a good card, but I don't think it quite was at the power level I was thinking it was when I was first playing it.
I did think it was better than it was, but I do think it's a playable card. You know, but everything you said is correct. At the end of the day, running even if you run a 1-2-2 line, that's 5 slots in your deck, and you're probably still running 2 Sabrinas, right? So it's like you're going to end up having, you know, dead Sabrinas in your hand because you did get the Pidgey set up, and there's going to be other games where you don't never even need the Pidgey, and the 2 Sabrinas would have been enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a pretty reasonable card, but I just don't, yeah. Its power level's not where I thought it would be, basically, after playing with it a couple times. Articuno, number 1, is going to be in the need support category, which is kind of funny. I mean, maybe it's not even the best name for what I think about this card. I just think this, as a more power level standpoint, it's just like, because it has Misty, right? I mean, what other support could you need? But I don't really want to be using Misty on this. I think out of like the birds that are non-EX, I think this one's by far the best. But it's just like 60 damage for 3 energy is kind of not where you want to be. Again, 20 damage per energy. And then you have a chance to paralyze, which is like fine. But the best thing about this card is that I can retreat it for one if I accidentally put it in my deck. You know, that's basically it. Like, I don't want to run this card in my deck.
Yeah, and you generally never want to competitively play Paralyze card that needs a coin flip, right? Because it's like your strategy essentially is I need to paralyze you, but then when I don't have a backup plan because I only do 60 damage.
Again, it hasn't come up a ton this video, but I think it is hyper relevant that this does get one shot by Pikachu EX. As like I think the identity of this Pokemon is you're not building this up for like a sweeper at the end of the game. This is kind of like a hybrid where it's like, oh, you kind of want this early on because it has a decent HP pool for a basic. It does decent damage for a basic, but it needs 3 energy and then it may not do anything. So it just kind of doesn't do its job, I don't think. But like, I've used it and it's been okay, but like I probably would not run it again. Like I would just run Lapras every single time, probably. You know, because Lapras is 1 energy difference and would do 90 damage at this point, you know? Yeah, I like Lapras more. Kabutops. Cup Tops. I think this card could be strong because the wording of Leech Life is kind of interesting. Leech Life is very specific where it says you heal based on the amount of damage you deal, which is very cool. It implies to me that if there are cards, they could add cards that increase the damage and that this would then get way, way, way better. Whereas things like Venusaur always heals for 30, right? Like those are stagnant numbers where this one changes based off the damage. I think it's like okay, but I really think if this card was like, I think it coming from a fossil sucks. I think it being a stage 2 kind of sucks. And then 50 damage, like again, it's kind of the same Beedrill thing, right? It's like, it just like, this is a low payoff for how much investment of cards of your deck you're putting in. Yeah, he's like better than Beedrill in some ways, but I mean, he just does so little damage. 50 damage is just so low. He's a far-fetched, man. He heals himself, but that only helps against like the Vaporeon thing, against Pokemon that are doing low amounts of damage. Once they start hitting for a certain amount, he just kind of is falling over. But if they have a way to boost this damage by like 30, and then, you know, they could hit you for 80 or 90, and then you hit them back for 80 or 90, then you full heal, that's suddenly getting pretty good.
Yeah, and I think he has the ability in the future to be really interesting. If they print a card like Muscle Band that just, you know, goes on a Pokemon as an item and makes you do 20 more damage, or a Strong Energy, which was like a fighting specific energy. I don't know how that would work mechanically in this game, but that made you do 20 more damage. Those kind of things, right? Because once you get to 70 damage and you have the weakness factor against Pikachu, you now have the ability, well, actually, it doesn't even really matter, but you have the ability to heal all of the damage Pikachu's doing to you, is the idea, right?
Yeah. I mean, Leech Life has got really specifically powerful wording, but it needs some support. Like, this is the quintessential, I feel like, needs support category card. It's just not doing enough right now, but there's so many, like, once they boost this damage, this card could become, like, a real meta contender and just impossible to kill. Like, if this card becomes good, people are running like 150 damage sweepers in every deck because you have to be able to one-shot this. If he could heal for 90 a turn, you're never going to be able to 2-round this or even 3-round it at that point. Plus, he's got Scythes for hands. Yeah, I don't know how he's not Scyther. Is that not just Scyther?
Right. He's like the ancient version of Scyther, right?
Who would have thought that, like, I've never even thought about the original 150, which I actually forget Kabutops is. But think of Scyther. They have like, hey, we have a grass dude with scythes for arms. And they're like, all right. And they're like, then, you know, someone of the same day is like, we have this really cool idea. We found, there's this guy from underground. He has scythes for arms. They're like, oh shit. All right, put them both in. And this guy came in and is like, we have an idea for a bee. All right. He's going to have drills for hands. And they're like, all right, okay, we need to, you guys are not going to work in groups anymore, okay?
And then they're like, wait. What if we have a guy and he's got gloves for hands?
Yes.
It's like, enough with the hands. If I hear one more hand thing, I'm cutting everyone's hands off.
I bet when they made Alakazam, his arms were spoons at first, and then they had to tone it down a little bit. All right, Gengar. Gengar is a reasonable card. I think it's got a pretty powerful effect. And I know what I just said is going to sound weird because I'm like, oh, Beedrill's not worth it because it's 70 damage. I actually am feeling a little bit better about the 50 damage here, even though they're both stage 2s, because Bother does have a relatively significant upside of your opponents can't play supporter cards during their next turn. That's like a pretty noticeable effect depending on the meta, but right now when there's not that many good items and people are running like 6 supporters, like 2 Professors, 2 Sabrinas, maybe 2 Misties, you know, things like that, like the games aren't that long where if you bother them once, they're not going to be able to play all the supporters they want to that game. So it is actually a pretty significant downside, but I'm not sure it's worth running it just to inconvenience them a little bit, but it does seem like good. It seems reasonable. I just don't know if I would actually frequently make this as a deck building decision to run this card.
Yep. He's my favorite Pokemon, and I know he's one of your favorite Pokemon.
Yeah.
I actually think this one is more playable than the EX version of the card because you're working with like 3 energy attachments to be able to make an attack, and of course you don't want to run 2 stage 2, so you don't have access to the energy acceleration or ramp. And this doesn't need very much, you know, dedication for energy wise, and you can be building something else up on the bench while you're trying to slow down their game plan. The biggest issue is our supporters aren't late game enough and they aren't controlling enough. But if you printed a card like Lysander, which is like a supporter that allows you to pick the Pokemon like Weeping Bell does and bring it up to attack it, all of a sudden, you know, that's usually a game-ending play that people would use. All of a sudden, Gengar becomes really good at stopping you from doing that.
Yeah, I like these cards that are like kind of unassuming because they don't do that much right now. But like these are the kind of cards that we're really going to want to keep in our mind when they release new cards. Because like this suddenly could be an anti-meta like powerhouse, you know? And I do really like the card. All right, well, we've got 3 Pokemon left. Nidoqueen is trashed here. This card fucking sucks, bro. I don't think it's worse than Moltres, but I think this card is really, really bad. The thing is, Nidoking is like reasonably fine, but Nidoqueen, it does 80 damage for 3 energy. But Plat, it does 180 damage for 3 energy. No, it doesn't. It does 180 damage for 3 energy 1 out of 60 games, you know, 1 out of 70 games. I don't know what the actual math is, but I bet it's less than 1 out of 10 games. And then the other games, it's just you're running so many not good cards in your deck. You're running probably 12 average cards or bad cards in your deck. That's most of your deck. That's 60% of your deck dedicated to not very good cards. What are the chances that your deck's going to be good at the end of that?
Somewhere below 1%.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not going to happen. The payoff is, here's the thing. The payoff is actually not bad. The payoff of 180 damage is pretty good, but the cost is like way too high. If this was a card that said, hey, any Nido in your bench counts towards this. Like if you were running like, oh, I could run Nidoqueen, evolve it, and then have 2 Nidorans or Nidorinos or whatever, and then another Nidoran female. There's, you know, like if they could do something like that, I'm like, okay, now there's something going on here. I don't need to run the full lines of these other ones, but I would say this card needs support. but I can't imagine support that makes it worth running 12 bad cards in your deck. They're gonna have to run like a Pokédoll that is like, this card counts as all Pokemon in the game, you know, and this card counts as a Nidoking, but it also draws you 2 cards when you have it on your bench every turn. Like, I don't know what they need to do, but this is not a viable deck. The thing about Nidoqueen is this is one of the only cards that you read it and it builds the entire deck for you, and the deck is bad. So there's not a lot of flexibility.
I'm really disappointed in the fact that, you know, maybe the most like build around card, right? It almost just tells you what you put in your deck right off the rip, right? You got 12 of the cards down. We're all playing 2 professors. We're all playing 2 Pokeballs, right? We're probably playing, you know, 2
Sabrinas.
And then it's like you get 2 deck slots to play with. So it's like,
yeah, that's right. What are you gonna do? You're probably gonna run 2 Kangaskhan so your Nidos don't all die in the very first. Now you're running at least 6 basics, and then you're running Kangaskhan just so your Nidorenas, or you know, your Nidoran male and females don't die to EX Pikachu in the early game.
I think you could make this a 1 energy attacker that does 180 with all the same text, and then you have a reason to play it, right? So it's like, it's just cool for 1 energy to do 180, but it's still going to have the same percentage odds of actually getting to 2 Nidokings up. But when you attack for 80 for 1, you're just a better Beedrill. And then when you actually do have 1 Nidoking down, now you actually do a reasonable amount of damage where you knock out a Pikachu EX. Like, I just think like they missed the ability to be able to make this an actual playable card.
It's honestly, yeah, I would rather run Beedrill, because Beedrill doesn't build my whole deck and make it dog shit. Nidoqueen takes my whole deck and makes it bad. She doesn't contain her badness to just the card. She contains her badness to the whole deck. Yeah, worth talking about. I could shit on this card all day, because Nidoking and Nidoqueen were my original Pokemon. Those were like my guys. I would get Nidoking and I would go and he would just thrash all through Mount Moon, killing Zubats until I got to Misty. Then he would thrash Misty, and Nidoking was my man. And so now that their deck's not good, it hurts. It hurts, you know? I want that to be a good deck. But
and speaking of someone who I have an emotional attachment to, my boy Snorlax.
Snorlax.
Right.
Where do you think it should go, viewer? You think Snorlax is about the same thing as Kangaskhan, right? No.
Yeah, if you put them next to each other, it just has more HP.
This card is dog water. There is almost no reason. When I say almost, let me take that back. There is no reason to play Snorlax over Kangaskhan in this game. It does. There's so many reasons. All right, trust me. There's so many reasons. Just take my word for it. He has more HP than Kangaskhan, Platt. Yes, I know. That doesn't really matter. 100 versus 150. Yes, you can get one shot by a Pikachu with Giovanni, I'll admit. But like outside of that, they're almost getting 2-shot by everything, all the same stuff in the game. And Snorlax has the biggest disadvantage. He has a 4 energy attack that he can never, ever use. Like, who has ever attacked with a Snorlax? Like, if you attack with a Snorlax, I doubt you win that game. So Kangaskhan gets to start attacking for 1 energy. That's huge. Like, and you can be like, well, you don't need to attack with Snorlax. He's just here to be a wall. But if you just have a wall and they just ignore it, they're building up just like you are. Unless you have a deck that is all about building up the highest energy thing, and you hope that they don't have anything that's comparable as well, then it's fine. But they get to choose when to break the Snorlax. You're giving up a free point, so they only need to kill 1 of your EXs. And if you spent 5 turns building up energy on it, you know, or on your backline, so did they. It's not like your opponent's taking turns off. You know, they're chipping in and killing this, and then they decide when they're ready, they're going to kill it. Or when they're ready, they're just going to Sabrina it anyway, you know, and not even have to go through it. It does, because they can ignore it, you give your opponent all the power. You can't retreat it reasonably. It never gets to attack. It's a nothing card. It just sits there. It slows the game down, and it doesn't even particularly put it in your favor, I would say.
I agree with what you said. So I'm just going to say I would love to see either a different printed Snorlax, or they can make an errata, because it's a digital card game, right? You can change everybody's card, and if you make it better, nobody's going to be mad. So if they printed a card like Pokeflute, that if you played Pokeflute, it would wake up your Snorlax and it would just have different text, and now it would be playable. That would be a cool and very flavorful interaction. And then maybe it is able to do something. I don't know what it would be. Maybe it gets thick skin, maybe it reduces damage by 20 or something. Maybe it heals a little bit. But I would love Snorlax to be playable.
There will be a good Snorlax. There will be something. This one is not it. Snorlax is a great Pokemon. He is who I've modeled my life after. But right now, this is not it. If you're running Snorlax in your deck, I can't even think of the deck that would run Snorlax over Kangaskhan for like any. The only reason maybe would be because Pikachu EX kills Kangaskhan, and they're going super aggro tempo, and you need to guarantee this survives 2 hits so you can get 1 more energy on your thing. But even then, I think I would rather have the Kangaskhan just deal some damage to the Pikachu and then have a better chance of wiping it out on the next turn. But to each their own, I suppose. But I think Snorlax is one of the worst Pokemon in the game, besides Moltres.
I am calling out, if you're still watching the video, please, if you are an aficionado, Snorlax enjoyer, put in the comments what deck you play Snorlax in and why, so we can make Plat read that.
Yes, and then I'll have Laliette. We'll make fun of you in our Discord chat. We'll be like, look at this fucking idiot, bro. Oh, he plays Snorlax. He plays Snorlax in his Poliwrath deck because he likes that they're both fat boys. Shut up, bro. No, I don't know. All right, here we go. We got finally we got Dragonite here. Dragonite, I think, is like a super. I think it's a bad card. I think it actually deserves to be put lower. Yeah, imagine if you put out a Snorlax and they put out a Dragonite. I mean, that makes Dragonite look really good, because now while they're sitting there ignoring your Snorlax, they're building up a Dragonite, then they just kill your back row. If you put down a Snorlax and they even open with a Hitmonlee, bro, you feel like an idiot. They're just you're never gonna do anything. You're stuck. He takes 4 energy to retreat. You're gonna spend 4. Snorlax is a card that says sometimes instantly lose this game. It's like, no, God, Snorlax, you're so bad. Dragonite though, this card I think is pretty bad. But it's because I may have gotten really lucky while playing against it and unlucky while I played it, where a lot of my plays were kind of clunky because I wasn't getting the energy at the right times to kind of tempo this out. Where also when it was used against me, Dragonite hit all 200 damage on a 10 HP Pokemon that I had. Like literally, I was playing against it. I had a Pokemon with 10 HP. It was Jolteon, and Dragonite finally came online, and my opponent was like, attack! And it did all 200 damage to that 10 HP Pokemon. And then I just came in and I won because it didn't do anything. And so like Dragonite can completely whiff. It is a stage 2 that requires 2 energy types. No other Pokemon in the game requires 2 energy types. And it's a stage 2, and it takes 4 energy, and its damage is RNG. It's guaranteed to do 200, but where is it going? Nobody knows. It could be going up, down, left, and right, or all into the same spot. So I feel like when you're investing, if you're making your deck generate 2 types of energy, if you're building your whole deck around a stage 2, I feel like you do not want any level of RNG on your sweeping attacks. However, the reason why I'm not putting this lower, and I think maybe Laliette can add on to this, is that if you get to attack with Dragonite twice, a lot of games you are just going to win, because even with the RNG, like you hit this for 50, that for 50, this for 100, maybe nothing dies. The next turn you hit that for 100, that for 50. Like things are just going to start dying really fast. And you could potentially kill an EX and a basic or in a non-EX with 1 attack and instantly win the game out of nowhere. So I think this is kind of like a meme dream card, a gamble card, but it's not like the worst card in the game.
Yeah, so in our pre-discussion on the cards, we spent a lot of time on Dragonite because I didn't actually believe Plat, which is a horrible trait of mine where he's proven me wrong every time I've ever questioned him on anything like this. He has it recorded. It really did hit a 10 HP Pokemon that was in the active spot for all 200 damage, which doesn't seem like the way it should be designed. And if they change that, then maybe it will be a better card. But just the fact it can do that made me say, you know what, like, I don't want to put all this investment into a thing that has the ability to do that. But it does have 160 HP, and usually it survives. Like, when it comes up and attacks once, it usually gets to attack one more time. So the fact that most sweepers don't really get the chance to do that unless you're like an EX, he does have the ability to do that, because even something, you know, like a Venusaur non-EX has 160, but it's not a sweeper. It does 80 damage.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if they add any kind of like dragon support, that's going to be kind of exciting. They had a Lance that just allows you, like, Dragon Trainer. It's like draw a stage 1 or a stage 2, you know, Pokemon from your deck, or draw, you know, they could add any kind of like dragon support that I think would be cool and interesting. And I think Dragonite could be a lot better. I also kind of, the Draco Meteor, the way it's programmed though, is the way it's doing it, it doesn't seem like it's 4 separate instances of damage. It seems like it rolls targets and then it does all the damage at once, kind of, where it's like, all right, target 1 is that one, target 2 is that one, and then it just does like 50 times the amount of times it was targeted. It's kind of like a weird, because like this card could not exist in a paper game, right? Or does it exist in the paper game?
No, I mean, you would have to like roll dice or something. I mean, it didn't exist back when I played, but
again, like our exact ruling would also, the way we would assume it works, if something has 10 HP and it gets targeted, you would think that like it would deal the damage and then move on to the next thing, I guess. But in an actual card game, like in Magic the Gathering, this whole effect resolves at the same time, right? So it would work the way it would work in Magic, I would think. But it's just not the way that in a digital card game you would think it would work. Like Hearthstone, it wouldn't work this way at all. It would like fire 4 different missiles and missile, boom, blow it up. Then it would target something else that's already not dead, you know? So, I think his RNG is keeping him from being super high, but also I can understand that sometimes the RNG is a double-edged sword, and it also keeps it from being super low. I think it's a pretty.
I really hope that they change it to the individual instances where it's like 50, 50, 50, 50, and then I think that it would move up a tier and be a playable card. Yeah.
All right, well, we finished. That is our tier list of all the 3 diamond Pokemon in the game. It took longer than we wanted, but I got to edit some stuff out, so we'll see how long that it took. But for the most part, yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'm interested to know what you guys watching agree with, what you disagree with. What do you disagree with the most? What's the one where you're like, you guys are fucking sleeping on Golem, bro? Golem won me this one game, and that felt good. I'm like, all right, that's fine. Magneton has 80 HP. That's really low. Any final closing thoughts, Lolliet?
Yeah, I will, be looking out in the comments like I always do. I like the discussions that we have there, and, I always try my best not to be disrespectful or anything. So if you really are a Snorlax believer, I want to hear why.
Yeah, we need to help us understand why. Why? All right. Much love. This is Team Pocket signing out. Purplatypus is Purplatypus. I'll see you on the flip-flops. Bye!
Platypus on the rise, watch the views.